Still in Matthew 13, we're still looking at kingdom parables as we've designated them. And I think we had kind of just started roughly on these two that we're looking at a couple of weeks ago. The parable of the hidden treasure, beginning in down in verse 44, and also of the merchant seeking goodly or beautiful pearls. But look at verse 44 again. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Both of these parables really are discussing the same thing overall, and that is what is truly valuable in life. And when you discover it, what do you do about it? And no matter how you discover it. Jesus obviously approves of the activities of both men. It's interesting, one kind of accidentally stumbled upon the treasure. The other one was actively seeking what he wanted. He was making a search. But they both made once-in-a-lifetime discoveries, and then they gladly exchanged everything that they had in order to buy them. And so Jesus says, these guys recognize real value when they see it, and they took the proper course of action when they found it. And we mentioned last week that finding a buried treasure back in the time of Jesus probably wasn't unusual. We mentioned, there weren't a whole lot, not like today where you have banks and financial institutions. There weren't a lot of places you could safely keep your money. And so many times people would bury them. In fact, you see that, if you'll recall, in the parable of the talents. What did the what did the man with the one talent do? He buried it. Yeah, he buried it. And so obviously that was pretty common back then. And you miss the whole point of the parable if you want to get into the legalities of the situation. Some people say, well, he stumbled upon this field and he found this guy's money, and then he bought it from him. Well, first of all, if the current owner had buried the treasure, what? He wouldn't have sold the field. I mean, obviously somebody else had left it and either forgot about it or something had happened to them or whatever. But you're reading it too much into it. And besides, the Jewish law at the time was finders, keepers, losers, weepers anyway. So it was properly his. But you go too far when you start worrying about those kinds of things. The point is his willingness to surrender and to give up what he had for this treasure. And he says the kingdom of heaven is like. So what are we willing to do? What are we willing to surrender and give up, for this treasure? It's interesting that this first guy found it by accident. He stumbles upon it. It reminds us of Isaiah 65:1 and Hosea 2:23, which are both quoted, by the way, in the book of Romans. Turn over to Romans. And these passages, of course, applied to the Gentile world. The Jews had been God's chosen people to bring the Christ into the world, and they had been His chosen people for 1,500 years. The whole world had gone off into sin and gone their own way. But notice what he says in Romans 9:25. As he says also in Hosea, that's Hosea 2:23, I will call them my people who were not my people, and her beloved who was not beloved. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they shall be called sons of the living God. Now turn over to, really and more to the point, in Romans 10 verse 20, quoting Isaiah 65:1. But Isaiah is very bold and says, I was found by those who did not seek me. I was made manifest to those who did not ask for me. He's talking about the Gentiles in general, the Gentile world at the time Jesus came. God came looking for them. And many of them found Him. But they weren't looking. The Gentile world wasn't looking for God when He sent His Son into the world. But He went looking for them. And we see that with individuals in the New Testament. Nathanael. What about the Samaritan woman and Jesus at the well in John chapter 4? She wasn't looking for Him necessarily. Zacchaeus didn't expect Jesus to be dining with him that day. And I guess the greatest example of all of somebody that wasn't looking for Him would be who? I think somebody said it. Yeah, the Apostle Paul. He's on his way to Damascus to do what? Persecute Christians. And here Jesus surprises him on the road. But the key is what happens when you find it. So there's really about three major lessons we get from these parables, and specifically this one, the hidden treasure. The kingdom of heaven, it says, is like a treasure, but it's not just any treasure, right? It's the greatest treasure. It's the most wonderful of treasures. Its value is supreme and worth anything and every effort we can make to have it and to enter into it. And unfortunately, most of the people in this world don't see it and ignore it. So that's number one. But number two, think about the sacrifice. What did this guy do? What did he give up? Everything. To pay whatever the price is. And that's the thing about it. You don't get it for nothing. Jesus said in Matthew 16:24, if any man wants to come after me, let him what? Deny himself. It requires self-denial. Remember the rich young ruler, right? What does he lack? What do you lack? Well, go sell everything you have and follow me. He couldn't do it. What are some of the things that Christianity will cost us at times? And maybe not at the same time, but what are just some things? Family. We've had members here that were estranged, cast out from their family because they obeyed the gospel. What else? Good, very good. Sometimes jobs or promotions we lose out on, or can. What else? Friends. Okay, sure. Got to give up some friends sometimes. Maybe they give you up. Maybe you have to give them up. Well, now it could, yeah. Could get to the point where it costs you your property, your money. Should cost us some sacrifice. We should be giving sacrificially anyway every first day of the week, but it could cost you a lot in that regard. Money. How about time? Does the Lord demand anything of our time? It can demand a lot and it can cost us a lot. But here's the thing. David said in the long ago, go to 2 Samuel 24. This passage has always impressed me. What did David say about giving something to the Lord that didn't cost him anything? Look at 2 Samuel 24. God has struck the people with a pestilence for 3 days. The messenger of Jehovah, the second member of the Godhead, stands ready to exact God's punishment upon Jerusalem. But he says, you go up and you offer a sacrifice on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, which was located, by the way, where? Where was the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite located at that point in time? Mount Moriah, the same place Abraham offered Isaac, same exact spot that David would build the temple. But notice what David said down there in verse. Araunah says, Gad comes to David in verse 18, says, you go up there to the threshing floor and erect an altar and make a sacrifice. And so Araunah rushes out to meet the king and says, why are you coming to me? And he says, I'm going to buy this threshing floor from you and build this altar to stop this plague. And Araunah says, no, don't. I'll just give it to you. I'll be glad to give it to you. I'll give you the oxen for the burnt offering, the wood, whatever. Then the king said to Araunah, verse 24, no, but I will surely buy it from you for a price. Nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which cost me nothing. Yeah, it's easy. Easy come, easy go. You give me something, doesn't cost me anything, yeah, I'll give it away. Right? A little bit harder when it cost us something. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver, built an altar to the Lord, offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And of course, eventually made provision for Solomon to build the temple on that very spot. And of course, we go to the New Testament. Obviously, Jesus, you're not going to get a better example of someone willing to give up everything for his kingdom, because God himself leaves heaven, leaves the splendor, the glory that he had with his Father, lives as a poor person with nothing, and then is tortured to death for all of humanity. You don't get a better example than that. But you start thinking about followers of Christ, and again, we always go back to who? At least the one person that we read about in the New Testament seems to have, at least as far as that's recorded, seems to have given up about as much as anybody, and that's who? Paul. Look at Philippians chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. Paul says, but what things were gained to me, these I have counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I also count all things lost for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, trash, that I may gain Him, may gain Christ and be found in Him. And we've talked about before what he gave up, but he was a rising star as far as religious leaders in Judaism. He gave all that up to really be hounded the rest of his life because he was preaching Christ. So a lot of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, self-denial involved. This guy sold all that he had. But then notice the joy, and that would really be the third point. Does the guy regret selling all that he had? Oh man, I had to give up a lot for this. Did Paul, you ever get the feeling that Paul regretted giving up his former life for Christ? No, he said, look, I'm kind of torn in two directions here. I could stay and keep working for Jesus, and that'd be great for y'all, but I would really like to do what? I'd like to be with Him. Never regretted it. Never complained, doesn't complain. Because even though this guy sold all that he had for the field, the fact of the matter is he got more in return than what he paid. See, that's the bottom line. Paul did too. And that's the kind of joy we're to have when we give ourselves to Christ. A person who's really converted, we talk about we were talking about things you give up. Job, family, friends, whatever it might be. But the person who's generally converted doesn't give up that past life grudgingly. He doesn't. He said, man, this is a lot better. I'm getting much more than what I gave up. And Jesus said on one occasion, yeah, you're gonna lose physical. You may lose some physical relationships in this world because of me, but what are you going to gain in return? You're going to gain a whole new family, right? And a better one. So, the treasure is true value. And this guy was willing to do whatever he had to do to get it. And you see some of the same things emphasized with this merchant seeking beautiful pearls. Now, pearls were a gem pretty well sought after in the ancient world and even today. But they had a fascination for people of that day and in that area. And this guy spends his whole life seeking the perfect pearl. But he's different from the other guy because the other guy stumbled upon the treasure. Accidentally, really. He wasn't looking. But this guy's looking. I mean, he's got some purpose. He has a goal in life. And you think, well, so what's the big deal? Well, I mean, look around all the people you see on a daily basis. Maybe see on the news, maybe come in contact with in the workplace. Your neighbors that seem to just be wandering through life aimlessly, without purpose. You know, just kind of like, you know, a boat with no motor or sails. You're just out on the water, and whichever way the wind and the waves take you, that's the way you go. There's a lot of people that live that way, no purpose. And some people are just kind of satisfied where they're at. But real no proper sense of direction, which can rob you of the true joy of living. But it's not about just any purpose. Now, I know a lot of people without purpose, but you also probably know a lot of people with some purpose and with some drive and with some desire. But what are some of their purposes? What is it they seek? What is it they're after? Yeah, just whatever. There's things of this world, and there's a lot of categories. Maybe they're after money. We see people that are after fame. I mean, I think you see a lot of that if you're on social media. People just looking to make a name, be known, influence. And what's the next step up from influence? Power. People are looking for power. That's their purpose. Some people have, just have their purposes to have a good time. They're not aimless. They know what they want. It's to have a good time. And they spend a lot of their time and money on pleasure. So you can have a purpose. People, it's amazing to me to turn on the TV and just see some, and look, I know there's all kinds of things you can do in this world that are not sinful and you can have an interest in. But it's amazing to me how much time and money people can put into various things. And I'm not talking necessarily inherently sinful things, but it's amazing to me how much people can talk about anything. Turn on any of these sports channels and watch these shows with these guys yelling at each other all day and arguing about one play or one ball game or whatever. Yeah, they have desire and they have a purpose, but at the end of the day, what does it get you? And so it's not just, again, he had desire, he had drive, but it's not just any drive or purpose. Some are just in it for themselves. And so the problem is, of course, is that too many people, even if they have desire and purpose, they give it toward trifling things that in the long run are really of no significance. I heard somebody say on the radio the other day, when you're worried about something, they said, when I'm worried about something or I'm concerned about something, I stop and I ask myself, will this problem, will it matter? This thing that I'm worried about today, will it matter 5 years from now? Whatever it is you're worried about. I think it's a pretty good question to ask. You know, when you're trying to figure out, is this something I really should be, losing sleep over? Now, some things, yeah, you could be. Could be some, health diagnosis or something. But then, we have to go further than that. If I'm talking about my desire or my drive and my purposes in life, is what I spend most of my time and my thought and my efforts on, is it going to matter to me 50 years from now? Or 100 years from now? People are always talking about, I hear these politicians. Well, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. Well, what do you care? What do you care which side of history you're on? You're not going to know. And it ain't going to have anything to do with your eternal situation. Whatever historians or the people that are living at that time think of you then is not going to matter to you or me what they're thinking about me. But Jesus said the greatest purpose, Matthew 6:33, right? He talks about all these things the Gentiles seek. Clothes and food and money. And you can name all the things that we can seek or go after in this country at this particular age in which we live. But the bottom line, he says, seek first what? Kingdom of God, His righteousness. And so that's what this guy did. I mean, he was on a search for that pearl of great price, the one that was worth more than any other. And he was ready to pay the necessary price for it because he knew true value when he saw it. I like what one commentator says. He just didn't say, oh boy, I wish I had that pearl. Some people are kind of like that. Well, I wish I was a Christian or more active in my Christianity. What do people in the world, what do they do sometimes with Christianity? Especially people in positions of like the media and stuff. They generally do what toward Christians? What's their attitude toward us? Or Christianity in general? Don't they kind of belittle it? Make light of it? Well, that guy didn't do that with this pearl. He didn't say, well, and we do that sometimes because either we can't have it, we can't have something, or we're not really willing to give what it's going to take to get it, so what do? We kind of downplay its value, right? Well, it wasn't that big a deal anyway. I didn't really want it. Well, that's kind of what people in the world do with the church. Or I like what one commentator said, he didn't wait for the price to come down on the pearl. Well, I'll wait till the price comes down. You know what? I think I'll wait. I'll do what I want to do for about the first 70 years of my life. And then right at the end, I'll jump in and grab the pearl. Maybe I'll become a Christian and enter the kingdom. Well, we know how that usually turns out when we put things off. Name me some people, before we leave this parable, name me some people in the Bible. We mentioned some earlier that weren't really looking for Christ and the kingdom and they found Him. Name me some New Testament characters that were looking. Name me some people that were looking. Well, the wise men, yeah. They might have been the first ones. There's a good one. Nicodemus came to Jesus by night. He had some questions. Not like the other Jewish leaders who just wanted to harass Jesus. He came to him by night with serious questions, wanting answers. Who else? Well, Zacchaeus, after a while, yeah. Well, there was somebody that was seeking something, the woman with the issue of blood. But think about people that were looking for spiritual things, salvation. What about the eunuch riding in his chariot, reading from Isaiah? Who is this guy that the prophet's talking about? Do you know? Can you tell me? Well, there you go. Cornelius. What was Cornelius doing? He was praying, right? God answered his prayers. He was looking. What about those Bereans in Acts 17? What did they do? Search the Scriptures daily. So, just a few people that were active in their search. I would make this final just kind of aside or comment as we leave this parable. But you kind of have a problem with this parable if you're a Calvinist, right? This guy's looking, right? He spends his whole life looking. Well, if I'm a Calvinist, it doesn't matter if I'm looking, right? You just wait around and hope you're one of the ones that, you know, that you're one of the ones that the Holy Spirit hits you in the forehead like Benny Hinn would. Pow! And you fall over. Or maybe that was Chevy Chase. Yeah. True values. Are we seeking it? The kingdom. All right, well, let's continue on with our kingdom parables. We've got a couple of more we want to look at. Turn over to Matthew 20. We're finally going to leave Matthew 13 after about 7 parables. Let's turn over to Matthew 20. Laborers in the vineyard. Now, the parable begins in verse 1 of chapter 20. But the context begins before that. You know, and that's always helpful. But you'll go back to about Jesus has this encounter back in chapter 19 with the rich young ruler that we've already mentioned this morning. And the young man goes away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And Jesus says, you know, it's hard for rich people to enter the kingdom. Well, that was a stunning statement to the apostles because the Jewish idea of the time was what? What was their view of life? Just like the man born blind. Who sinned, this man or his parents? Well, if I'm rich, then what? God's blessed me. I'm in right with him. And that's really the philosophy of some people today. I mean, if anything else, the book of Job ought to tell you that's not true. But they're a little stunned, a little taken aback by that statement. It says they were greatly astonished. Who then can be saved? Well, so Peter, here he comes. Probably just says what everybody else is thinking. We've left all. See, that guy wouldn't leave his stuff. But we've left all and followed you. Now, you got to love this question. It reminds me every time I read this, and of course this was written first, but if you ever saw the movie, what's the baseball movie with Kevin Costner? Field of Dreams. He has a conversation near the end of the movie with Ray Liotta, who's playing Shoeless Joe Jackson. He says, you guys are guesting my corn. And they got to get in an argument. And he said, wait a minute, what's in it for me? Ray Liotta says, what do you say? What do you ask? What are you saying, Ray? And he says, I'm saying What's in it for me? You know, you're out here, you're playing in my field. What do I get out of it? And maybe that's not always a bad question. Peter said, hey, we've left all. What do we get? And so Jesus tells this parable in response. Probably, again, dealing with that attitude, because the Jews of the day and the Jewish leaders especially saw religion as a merit-based system. And there are some religions today that see it that way. For instance, think about the Pharisee and the publican when they went up to the temple to pray. What did the Pharisee say? What did the Jewish leader say? I'm glad I'm not like this guy. I do this, 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 and this. See, it's all about a scorecard. Well, the problem with that, of course, is nobody has a scorecard good enough. And the employer here is the dominant figure. He is the central dominant figure from beginning to end in this parable. He is generous. He gives grace, and he's faulted for that. And so there's a lot of talk among commentators, we can derive this lesson and that lesson, and we'll mention some, and we can. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact, look at the way this thing starts out. The kingdom of heaven is like a what? A landowner. Now, usually when we study this parable, our focus is the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who, and then we start talking about all the different laborers, and that's fine, and there are points to be made about their attitudes. But his first statement is, the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. Well, what was this landowner like? Who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, most commentators will say, and this could have happened at several times of the year, but most likely perhaps the end of August, early September, when the grape harvest was coming in, and you had to get it in before the middle of September when the rain started. So time was of the essence. And it still would be warm during the middle of the day then. Remember, these guys say, we've borne the heat of the day. But this guy's going throughout the day, and he's obviously said, I've got to get this crop in by the end of this day, the Jewish work day, 6 a.m., 6 p.m., but they probably worked about 10 hours out of the 12 after, with breaks and that kind of thing. But still, that's a long day. But he's got to get it in. And so he goes at various points during the day because he's figuring out along the way, what? I need more. I got to have more help. This isn't going to get done if I don't get more out there. And of course, what did the law say about paying the day laborer? These hired day laborers that lived from day to day. Their families lived from day to day. You got to pay him at the end of the day. Leviticus 19:13. Give him his hire on the day he earns it before the sun goes down, for he is poor and sets his heart upon it. Deuteronomy 24:15. Lest he cry against you to the Lord and it be sin against you. These people live day to day. They had to have it. So, he goes out. He says, sends them in, and he sends these first ones out at the beginning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And notice with the first bunch, he agrees. They come to an agreement as to what the pay is. And the pay is what a normal day's wage was at this time in history, a denarius. And he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour. What time's that? It's 9 o'clock now. Saw others standing idle in the marketplace, said, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, I will give you. Now notice with these guys, there's no discussion about the pay. They obviously just trusted in his goodness and justness that he would do what's right. And so there's no discussion of the exact amount. You just go and I'll give you what's right. So they went. And again, he went out about the 6th hour. Now it's noon. And the 9th hour, it's 3 o'clock. And he does the same thing. And about the 11th hour, it's 5 o'clock. He found others standing idle and said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive." So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, "Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first." And there are some points to be made there. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more. And they likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained, they grumbled, they murmured, even though they had agreed to it and, very possibly haggled over it, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them and said, "Friend," now notice, "I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?" God's good. He's gracious. "So the last will be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen." Let me ask you this. Suppose he had said to the guys that he hired at 5 o'clock, "Well, I promised the first guys a denarius, and you worked 1 hour. And this thing's been going 12 hours. Tell you what I'll do." Like some of us would have probably done. "I'll give you what? I'll give you 1/12 of a denarius." Let me ask you something. Would that guy's family eat that night? A 1/12 of a denarius wouldn't have done him any good. He might as well not have gone out there. And God's gracious. And He'll give us what we need. And obviously there's a rebuke here, somewhat, for the Jews. And Peter's attitude. All of their national history, they had been what to God? Well, but they were supposedly His chosen people, right? But go back to the same point is made in the parable of the prodigal. What happens at the end of that parable? Who's complaining? The older brother. Who represents who? Those scribes and Pharisees, Jewish leaders. Complaining about who? We've been with you for 1,500 years, right? We've stuck with you. These people went their own way, these Gentiles. And now you're going to give them the same blessings and opportunities as us. Well, what did they, you already said it, but what had they done for 1,500 years? Really? Never appreciated what they had. Very few of them. I mean, comparatively speaking. Were there faithful ones? Yes. Were there faithful periods in their history? Yes. But by and large, for the most part, nothing but complainers, grumblers, rebellion. They looked at God as a judge. Okay, that's fine. They saw Him as a lawgiver. Nothing wrong with that. But it would appear to me, maybe they saw Him as a taskmaster. When the correct view of God is what? Who is He to us? What is He? What did Brother Camp say he used to wish he'd have preached more on if he had to do it all over again? The fatherhood of God. God is a father. And if you as a father are gracious to your children, how much more than is God gracious to people? Yeah.
You see the same sort of thing even happening in the workplace when employees find out what the others are making.
Yeah.
And they'll fight and be upset.
Yeah.
And generally the newer employee gets hired at a higher rate than the ones that have been there.
I've seen that. I've heard some complaining over that.
Nobody ever looks and says, I'm happy that my coworkers
Yeah.
have a good income.
I hear you. I'm not sure that's the wisest move on the part of employers, but as far as workplace morale, but yeah, it is. You do see that. But you know these. Yeah.
Could it also be when those people were standing out and waiting on somebody, that they were still standing? That don't mean like they just came out there and they won out.
Yeah, these people weren't. And here's the thing about it, and I think you make a good point in the parable. There's nothing to indicate that these guys that were standing in the marketplace didn't want to be working. They obviously wanted to be working. I mean, they're standing there waiting. They're doing all that they can to get a job, to get the money for the day, to take care of their family. It wasn't like they wanted to be idle. And by the way, if you're going to do work for the owner, it has to be done where? It's got to be in his vineyard. There's not any productive work in the marketplace or anywhere else outside his vineyard, his kingdom. But you're right, these guys, they weren't lazy. Wasn't they didn't want to perform? And so some people will look at this and say, well, they can draw some conclusions, and maybe. I don't know if Jesus had this in mind, but you could look at it, I suppose, as, some people obey the gospel at different times in their life, and it may not necessarily be it's not, quote, their fault. They didn't hear it earlier or whatever. But they're still going to enjoy the same blessings that the rest of us enjoy. And it could be. But the bottom line is that, people come at different times. We understand that. Although he's certainly not encouraging delayed obedience here, if the point can be made at all from this parable about the delay. And I think that's right. And I think Dave has already, kind of hit on that. It's really about attitude. Peter said, what do we get out of this? But it's interesting. These guys agreed, maybe even haggled over what they were going to get. But the rest of them did what? What'd they do? Yeah, they just trusted him. They trusted this guy, this landowner, to be just and fair and gracious to them, and there was no discussion of pay. We just want to work. So I guess maybe if we're going to draw something from this parable for us, other than the fact, the graciousness and the fatherhood of God, maybe it ought to be, what's our attitude about the work of the kingdom?
Our attitude towards others, like I should look at others with the attitude that I want them to enjoy the benefits of heaven, regardless of when they came in or how bad they were. I mean, think about like some people, we might look at them like Jeffrey Dahmer and be like, he does not deserve, we could suppose, just like they did, he doesn't deserve to be here.
And really the attitude, as Dave was saying, should carry over into every area of our life, right? I mean, it's not we get paid for a job, but it shouldn't be just about the pay. If I'm a waiter in a restaurant, I want to do the best I can just because I want to be a good waiter. I want to serve people. Not because I'm, this pay is not very good, so they're going to get whatever I feel like giving them. It's our attitudes. All right. Well, next week we'll start then with the two sons. Go today into my vineyard and work. One of them said what? No way. One of them said, I will. Which one did the will of his father?